Exhausted. I am energized, alive, and so excited. I cannot thank you all enough for coming on and being part of this pep rally. And I appreciate the Liz and Nicole thing, but Tess, you were spot on. It is not Liz and Nicole. It is this energy that we all create together, this effervescent, because I always hated as a kid being called bubbly. It's this energy that just we can send the bubbles out into the world and the bubbles come back to us and the people find each other. We are not for everyone. We are not for the people who are boring, who just do panel discussions and phone it in, who just don't like the same, who love the same old, same old. That's not what we do. We try new things. We attempt new adventures. We try stuff that might not work. You can view this as the playground. If you've got a new technology that you think we should try, that you want to get in front of the community, that you want to test out, that you want somebody to beta for you, this is the place for that. We love to experiment. We love to have fun. But talking about the people that we attract, my next guest is an incredible, incredible human being, actually former CMO of Amtrak. He and I met at IMEX America when he was looking for his stage to speak, and I happened to be standing in an area looking like I knew what I was doing, which I didn't. But we struck up a conversation, and he is the chief partnerships executive with the TSA. Now, if you travel a lot, and as an event professional, you probably do, you walk through the airport and you see these signs about the real ID. And you probably ignore them because I know I did, because it's like a pop-up ad, a banner ad that you just never see anymore. This stuff's important. Even though you've been hearing about it since probably 2004, May 7th, 2025, that's this coming year, Real ID starts to be enforced. So David and I were able to catch up the other day. We got this one pre-recorded for you because Teams versus Zoom versus all the tech. We made it happen. So I'm going to turn it over to my conversation with David Lim.
Fun day with David Lim, Chief Partnerships and Engagement Officer for the TSA. David and I actually ran into each other by crazy random happenstance at IMEX Americas this year when he was trying to find a place to go and I was standing there. And then we had this really long conversation and I was like, oh my gosh, David, you have got to come explain what's going on to our community. So TSA, I am TSA Precheck. I have all the things. I even have my real ID officially, but David was telling me all about the real ID and how it's actually being enforced, going into effect May 7th of 2025, and it could prevent your attendees from getting to your event. So, David, tell us a little bit about this program. Is it a TSA program? Is it a government program? What is it?
No, so Real ID is really a law that was passed by Congress as part of the 9/11 Commission Act. And it really, all 50 states and 5 territories are compliant. And what that means is each state can offer a Real ID license, but most states also offer a regular driver's license. And what's really important about Real ID is that it established minimum security standards for state-issued driver's licenses and identification cards that federal agencies will accept. So it's not just TSA, it's federal buildings and military facilities. So a Real ID identification is needed in 3 areas. Number one, and this is what we'll be talking about this morning, the biggest use case is to board federally regulated commercial aircraft. Number 2 is to enter certain federal and military facilities. And third, which is very niche, is to enter nuclear power plants. So Real ID applies to adults that are 18 years and older who are flying domestically. As you know, anyone traveling internationally will have a passport, which is an acceptable form of ID.
Okay, so pause for me. Is TSA Precheck at all related to Real ID?
Not at all, and it is a question that we're often asked at presentations. So I'll replay the question. At the end of the presentation, we'll ask for questions. Someone will inevitably raise their hand and say, I have TSA Precheck. Do I need a Real ID? Which at first glance sounds like a rational question, but if you think a little deeper about it, the question we send back to that audience member is, did we, TSA, issue you a physical card? The answer to that is no. We've given you a known traveler number or a KTN number that you have to populate into your airline passenger name record so that we can vet you and then you'll see TSA Precheck on your boarding pass. Having said that, a lot of your members, I'm sure, are global entry.
Yeah, and I have a
members.
physical card
Yeah.
from Global Entry.
So for global entry, by the way, global entry, besides giving you expedited, arrival back into the U.S., gives you eligibility for TSA Precheck. So on the back of the global entry card is a pass ID number. That's your TSA Precheck known traveler number. So here's an important distinction that a lot of people, even in our industry, conflate. That is, global entry is an acceptable form of identification and will be accepted after May 7th. It is not Real ID compliant. I make that distinction because some advisors, some event planners will ask us, oh, my clients have a passport. Will that get them through the checkpoint? The answer to that is yes. But if they were to try to use that at a federal or military facility that has its own implementation plan, they may not have access. So a really, really important point for your audience is you should encourage your clients to get a Real ID driver's license before May 7th. But if they're unable to do that, or if they decide they don't want to do that, there is an alternative to board the aircraft. And that alternative is go to tsa.gov/ID. That will give you all the other acceptable forms of ID that TSA will accept. So, for example, the most obvious one is a passport card, a global entry card, military ID, a green card. Those are identifications that TSA consider acceptable forms of ID, but it's outside of being called a Real ID compliant identification card.
Okay, and so I know that my Texas driver's license has this little star right there
Yes.
at the top. So I know that's a Real ID, but they don't all have that same star, right? Not all states do that?
Yeah, most of them have the star. And what we encourage, and what your members should do is, as their clients ask them questions, always go to the local DMV. If you go to TSA.gov/Real ID, you'll see an interactive map. So you'll see all 50 states. If you just click on your state, it will bring you to the state DMV. So the state of Washington, as an example, does not issue a Real ID driver's license. What they issue is an enhanced driver's license. So instead of a star, there is an American flag. And there are 4 other states that do that, and those are acceptable. Through
They
the
will get you
checkpoint,
through. Okay.
and that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if you are in a state that does not offer Real ID, is that a challenge, or does everyone offer it?
Yeah, everyone offers it. The difference is many states offer a Real ID and a regular license.
So you have to ask.
Yes, and in some cases, a regular license may be renewed completely online. For Real ID, you do have to come into the DMV. And what's really important is that as your clients are trying to determine whether or not which license they should actually adopt, when they call into the DMV, if they call, they should ask about the benefits of one versus the other. In other words, a regular license is not Real ID compliant and is not an acceptable form. It's not another acceptable form of ID that TSA will accept after May 7th, 2025.
Okay. And then what about those of us that have Clear? Does that affect anything?
Yeah. Clear, that's actually another question that comes up. Clear has nothing to do with Real ID. So Clear is a private sector program that gives you expedited screening in what we call the queue. So Clear is also an enrollment provider for TSA Precheck. So just on the topic of TSA Precheck, just to move off that a little bit. So TSA Precheck now has 3 enrollment providers. Clear is one of them, Idemia is another, and Telos is another. So if your clients go to tsa.gov/precheck, you'll see 3 different options. Each of those offer a different price, and there's a different value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
But remember that all of them offer, it's anywhere from, I think, I'm going to use an approximate range, $70 to $78 or to $85, but they're all good for 5 years. So on average, it's $15 a year, which obviously is a good value. And for your clients who are looking into that, it depends upon, I think a key attribute is where are their locations? Because obviously you want to go to a location that's closest to you. And if you go through the website, drop down on, when you type in your zip code, it will tell you what are the locations closest to you. But the enrollment for TSA Precheck is very easy. It's 5 minutes online. During the online process, you hit the drop-down menu with your zip code. You make the appointment. When you come in, and it's really an appointment. We don't like to call it an interview. It will take 10 minutes, 15 at most, because really what we're doing is we're ensuring you are who you say you are through different identification. We'll tell you what to bring in. And then we'll send you your known traveler number in the mail. You get an email, in about 5 days. So it's very, very quick.
Okay. And you mentioned that this Real ID law went into effect after 9/11. So has it been trying to roll out for nearly 20 years?
Yes, it was passed in 2005.
Okay.
It's been delayed several times. And more recently, because of COVID, the adoption numbers have not gone up. So if you can imagine, during COVID for 3 years, not only did people not want to leave their homes, but DMVs, many of them had either limited hours or were closed. And even if they were open, people were hesitant to go in, without a mask. But now all DMVs are open. I will tell you that DMVs are particularly aggressive because we're working closely with them on promoting Real ID. I mean, as an example, the state of Illinois has 4 mobile vehicles. They're bringing those mobile vehicles to events and to office buildings, if you will, to make it easy. So they're bringing Real ID to where the people are, actually at events. I will tell you that Massport in Massachusetts, they are taking our content, putting it on their screens. We're actually exploring advertising, and they're actually paying for this, advertising in the bins. That's actually in discussion. Sounds easy, but there are a number of logistical issues. But the fact that the state and the local DMV are promoting it to that extent tells you they are behind it, and they understand the importance of having everyone understand why Real ID is critical, because the last thing we want is any sort of disruption at the checkpoint. And we are very sensitive to customer experience. I mean, listen, all of your members and every travel brand, what do they care about? They care about customer experience. I think there's just a plug for TSA that they often forget. We are the first gate, literally. In other words, we can determine how the rest of your trip goes. Yeah. So, and people say, well, if I have TSA Precheck, well, you can't get to TSA, you can't experience TSA Precheck until you're Real ID compliant, because you have to get through the checkpoint, right?
Right. Okay. So what's going to happen on May 7th, 2025? Will people just not be allowed to board anymore?
Well, yeah, no, that would be a disaster, obviously. So what we did in September, we filed a rule. A rule is really an attempt to amend the law, and we are waiting for approval. And what we've asked for is approval to move forward with what we call a phased approach. So I don't have details of what a phased approach is, but a phased approach will allow us to explore different scenarios to mitigate, potential disruption at the checkpoint, because, we're concerned for safety of travelers, the experience, obviously, and our own employees and the industry at large. So the phased approach will be out well before the deadline. And once the details of the phased approach are available, we will post it on our website. I will get it out to partners. Certainly, Club Ichi will be on that list, so you'll have it right away, and you can share it with all of your members. But again, even though
it's unlikely that on May 7th, if I have a Real ID, that I'll be put into a room with a dangling light bulb and interrogated. Probably not going to happen.
Highly unlikely.
Okay, great.
And even if when you read the phased approach, you say, "Oh, well, that's that sounds rational. I feel a little better about it." We would still encourage you, get your Real ID, because what we have discovered also is that in the previous delays to the date, a delay to the date is not an incentive for people to, it's just another reason to procrastinate. So we think, get your real ID or get in the habit of carrying another form of ID that we accept. So for example, people will say, oh, and I brought this up before, people will say, oh, my clients have a passport.
Mhm.
And that's fine. I'm sure they'll remember it when they're traveling internationally. My question is, will they remember it if they're flying just to Chicago, LA, Miami, or San Francisco? So now is probably a good time to communicate to your members that get your real ID and get in the habit of, also having with you another form of identification that TSA accepts. And that
Right,
will
okay.
ensure a seamless, transit through the checkpoint. Right.
So for event professionals that are doing attendee communications and sending out know before you go and all of these things, we need to make sure we have some sort of sentence in there that says, before you travel, ensure that your ID is real ID compliant and or you bring your global entry card, passport, or other acceptable form of identification.
Yeah,
Does
no,
that sound
that's
right?
absolutely true. I will tell you that the airline industry in particular for the last year or so have been messaging Real ID in 3 touch points.
Mhm.
So in the reservations process, at check-in, and at where you're checking in luggage at the airport. That has delivered hundreds of millions of impressions, but it's a simple, are you Real ID ready? And a
Mhm.
link to our site. So for your members, any where that they can put that in their communications would be helpful. It obviously real estate on any communication is important. It can literally just be a link to our site. Are you Real ID ready? If you're looking for content, if you go to the tsa.gov/real ID, you'll see under campaign toolkits all of our creative assets. You can pull from that. Certainly give my name as a contact for if anybody needs any other content. And again, at your invitation, we're always available to present, brief, and communicate to any of your member audiences. So please
Spectacular.
reach out.
Oh my gosh. David, thank you so much for being here
Okay.
with me today.
No,
I'm so glad we
yeah,
bumped into each other
yeah,
in Las Vegas.
yeah,
This is amazing.
yeah. Listen, thank you for the opportunity to share the topic. Remember, we are less than 5 months away.
Mhm.
Thank you again. I will close with one thing, with an ask that as your members are celebrating, their holiday festivities, bring up the topic of Real ID, and I'll tell you why. We do a bi-monthly national survey, and one of the channels that always pops up and ranks very high in answer to the question, how did you hear about Real ID? No surprise, word of mouth.
Mm,
So, I
yeah,
don't want to
it's true.
discount.
I think we can all vouch for the fact that nobody reads any of our emails. Nobody sees pop-up banners and nobody sees the stand-ups at the airport that tell you about it. So yes, tell a friend. Make sure
That's
you're
right.
compliant and tell a friend to get compliant.
That's right. That's
I
it.
love
So
it.
thank you. Listen, thank you again for the opportunity. Have a great rest of the telethon, and
Thank you.
happy holidays and a safe and healthy 2025 to you and all your members. Thank you
Thank you so
again.
much, David.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, I'm on back. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that conversation. And I know that we're starting off on kind of a serious note, so I thought I would put on my more fun shirt that my children do not think I should wear in public. But let me tell you, for our holiday vacation, I'm wearing this at the airport, and I have placed a bet with my daughter that every person who tells me they like my shirt, she owes me $1. And every person who, if nobody tells me that they like my shirt, then I owe her $100. So, and I'm not allowed to dab in public. So I'm just doing that on screen. Apparently that was wrong. I don't know how to do it.